Executive Director of Common Sense Adoption Services.
And I'm Lori Teeter. I'm the Program Supervisor here at Common Sense.
And in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about the matching process when we're actually recruiting for a permanent placement for a family and child. And this looks a little bit different from our last video on the foster care matching, although there are a lot of similarities too. So we're going to just try to tease out a little bit how this is different. And this is geared towards families that we're working with whose primary goal is to adopt a child. And that process is probably going to happen through the foster care system. But sometimes we go about it a little bit differently than what we discussed in our last videos. So this is really going to be those cases where we're doing some active networking and recruitment to find waiting children who are maybe at a little bit different point in the process. So talk a little bit, Lori, because you do a lot of this work. We have a team here who do this, but you head up a lot of this around how do we go about kind of finding this group of kids?
We have a history. We have a solid reputation of being a provider for permanency services with the counties that we have served throughout lots of years, a few decades. So I think we're well known for that. So when we inquire, we say that. We use the tools, which would be a family profile that could have been done by the statewide adoption network. And we use our knowledge. We use what we know about our families and the resources that they have, what they're open to, and how they're wanting to help children heal and offer children not only just foster services, but permanency if needed.
Yes, so we're networking with oftentimes other private providers who are providing a service on behalf of children in the foster. So we're talking to people who are doing child-specific recruitment. So they might be another private provider working with a child to locate a permanent resource. We're also getting referrals from the Pennsylvania Adoption Exchange.
Yes.
So any of our families who are looking to adopt, we've registered on PAE, and that generates some referrals for kids who are waiting for a placement. And families get copies of some of those referrals, or maybe they're going on the website and looking at that.
There's many different tools that we use. Again, one of them is the PAE. But again, we use our connections, we use our networking abilities. If we have families that are particularly skilled, knowledgeable, open, and ready for a placement, we get to work. We start making calls and saying, hey, we have these terrific resources. Here's who we have. Do you have children? Here's what we can do. What are your needs? And it's really about collaborating with the agencies that are ready to make a placement.
Yeah. So this process, unlike when we're getting calls about foster children who are, there's a much more immediate need, this can be a little bit slower process because this may be a child who's in care already. The family is not a permanency resource, and so it's likely we're going to get maybe a child profile on this child that's going to give a lot more detail about who they are, what they've been through, and we're going to be reviewing that information to see if we feel there's some fit.
Yes, as much as we can. Sometimes we rely on our families to take a look at things and then we process. Sometimes, occasionally, I'll get a child profile for a couple children and I'll pass it along, or we'll meet with a potential resource and then we talk about it. They'll highlight things, they'll ask questions. It's a back and forth, often a sharing of information.
So the other thing that can happen for families, and it's not that this doesn't happen with foster care referrals, but you're maybe a little bit more likely when we're doing this kind of matching work to be invited to an interview.
Yes.
The family's likely to be invited to an interview. If they're expressing an interest, the county or the provider agencies seeing the potential that there's a match. So families may go for an interview to learn more about the child, let the placing agency get to know them a little bit better, and it can be a competitive process, correct?
It can be, and it should be. The agency's goal is to find the best fit that's going to offer stability and consistency so children do not have to continue their journey in foster care, moving from home to home. Stability is the goal. So it's really important to do that work and utilize the tools. Again, I always say that. And I think the most helpful and useful, beneficial information is often coming from the people who know the children. That can be foster parents, that is case managers, it could be teachers, and we can try to get that information available to help make the best decisions for children.
So one of the things that I think can be very challenging when we're and it, not just when we're doing this kind of matching, but even families getting referrals, other types of referrals. Sometimes those referrals are very positive. I mean, they're really trying to put forward the most strengths-based, but it's not necessarily the full picture.
Right.
So I know that families can be really disappointed when they get, say, a referral from PAE, and they get so excited because this child sounds perfect, or they're on the PAE website and they're seeing kids and going, oh, why don't I know about this child? Well, a lot of the time we know that because they're not going to put out on a public site all the gory details, that the backstory on a child might be very different. And it's not that they're misrepresenting that child. Again, these are sort of public.
It's sharing of information.
Yeah, and we don't want to just put all of that out for the public, but it is sort of a cautionary tale.
Yes.
If you're seeing a referral and getting really excited, we know that if they're truly waiting, there may be a whole lot else going on that makes that a much more challenging placement than maybe it looks like on the surface.
And things can change rather rapidly. Sometimes in a few weeks or a few months from when a report is written. Things can change in the life of a child pretty rapidly.
Right, and the other thing that I think, and speaking of things changing, sometimes those referrals that are out there aren't current.
Right.
We know that, they could be 3 to 6 months old. Maybe decisions have already been made, but the paperwork hasn't processed to pull them off the site. Sometimes the county's still going through a review process looking at families they've already had referred, and they're not interested in any more referrals, So sometimes just because a child appears to be waiting doesn't mean they really are.
That can be one of the most frustrating things for waiting families, because information feels like answers. And sometimes there's a real lack of follow through or information that can feel really frustrating. But we try to help support families in understanding why those things are individually. Because it doesn't always feel good.
No, and back to our other video, the same considerations play in this process. There's so many nuances. So just because a family's interested doesn't mean you meet the need. The county or the placing agency may really feel that this child has some specific needs, that you're not the best fit, or you'd be a great fit if you lived in Western PA, but they really want to keep this child. You you might be a great family for this child, but you live in the wrong area, or they really
Right.
don't want this child placed in a rural set. I mean,
Yes.
it's still the same challenges we face
Yeah.
with permanency. And the last thing I want to say before we wrap up this video, this process that we're talking about is not the only path to permanence. So, some families feel like if they just take a traditional foster care referral, that they're just going to be a revolving door.
Right.
But the vast majority of children
Yes.
in foster care who are not going to return home, are
Right.
not going to go to kin, are going to stay with their
Yes.
foster resource. So, if you're open to fostering, there's a good chance, if we do a good job in knowing the cases, that you may get in on the ground floor and be that permanent
Yes.
resource. It may
That's the
take
goal.
time. That's the goal
That
for
reduces
us.
the number of placements that children have to.
Right. So, I want to point out that, there are many ways to achieve permanency. And this is one that we've been talking about now, but traditional foster placements are a very viable way. But there's legal risk. I mean, there's legal risk with most of
Absolutely.
these. So I hope that this information was helpful in kind of understanding what goes on here in our office, that families aren't always privy to, sort of the sausage mill of trying to sort through a whole lot of information. And make placements happen.
Right.
So it's kind of messy, but we're really hard at work trying to make good, strong, successful placements. And so thank you for joining us, and I hope you'll stay tuned for our next video. Thanks.